The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us this afternoon for the latest in our series of webinars. I can see we've got quite a few people with us. Before we get started, if I could ask everyone just to use the app to raise your hand just to show that you can hear me and you can see my screen okay. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for joining us this afternoon for the latest of our series of webinars. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Akixi. I think we may have touched upon it a few weeks ago, but there's no harm in recapping these sorts of things. But also one of the things that we've done quite a bit is talk about the general features of Akixi. But today I hope is maybe just to give you a little bit more insight into how it can be used and what some of the stats actually mean. But before we get into that, I do have really just one simple slide just to talk through the product in general. For those of you that don't already know, we offer this Akixi reporting tool. Akixi are actually a software vendor partner of ours. The software is made by them, but fully integrated with the InClarity BroadSoft platform. By API, it will take copies of all the calls that have been made into its own repository, a fully researchable repository, which can be accessed online by the customer to drill into to ask basically whatever questions they want. It's a bit of a sandbox, quite a powerful tool for interrogating data. In terms of how it works commercially, every user of the InClarity voice service that needs to generate data to be reported on will need to be licensed as a user of Akixi. So for an estate of 50 heads, and all 50 of those heads need to be reportable, then that's 50 user licenses of Akixi to create that data repository. And then separately, there's a license per supervisor or per administrator to access that data and actually create the reports. Those supervisors can be one or more of those voice users. They can be other users. That's handled entirely separately. But in a situation where the supervisor is also both generating data and also needing access to the data, they'll need a license of each type, both a user license to generate the data and the supervisor data to access the reports. In addition to that, there are 3 tiers of access that we can provide. 3 tiers of data that we generate, depending on which level that you take the service at. Akixi Lite is the entry level, is the cheapest level, which will provide access to historical reports only. So calls made after the fact, you can run reports to see what happened earlier today, yesterday, last week, last month, or what have you. But it's based on historic activity only. Akixi 1000 is an improvement on that, where you have all those historic reports, but you also have access to a number of real-time reports. So visually, you can see things updating in real time. That will extend to sort of a wallboard or dashboard type view. So some of the views I'll go on to show you in a bit more detail in a moment. But yeah, it's a lot more powerful than the historic version. But there's also a third version, the Akixi 2000, which is primarily aimed at users of the BroadSoft call center features. If you take the BroadSoft call center from InClarity, then we would always recommend that you take the Akixi 2000 reporting as well to get the full power of the overall package. It's able to give you stats specifically on your call center users data, call center user activity that you wouldn't get at the other levels. Also, more recently, there's a few other things as well. We also offer a compliant call recording solution through our partners Dubber, and although Dubber have their own web portal, there is the opportunity to integrate the two portals for the two products, the Akixi web reporting and the Dubber recording, so that actually from the Akixi side, as you're reviewing your calls, you can click through and access the call recordings and play back the call recordings natively through the same window. And separately, there is also a mobile app. While in principle, to create your reports and access your reports, schedule your reports, you would do that through a web browser on the desktop. There is also the possibility of reviewing some of reports through the mobile app. It's primarily aimed to give you the sort of the wallboard view through the app, but there is an extra license that gives you a few more functions there. Okay, so let me just move on to, let's move that out of the way. So the Akixi, as I say, is primarily designed to be used through the browser. So for every supervisor or administrator that's licensed to access their data, they will be able to come in here, to log in here to create their own reports. Any reports you've previously created will be shown along these tabs here on the bottom of the window. Each tab represents a different open report, and you can scroll through them manually to see what's open. You can also spawn additional reports. There are some pre-saved reports here on the left, which you can just double-click on to spawn as they are, and then modify. Or down here on the bottom left-hand corner, there's an Add Report button here that lets you create your own reports from scratch. And the creation of the reports is pretty much the same either way. So I can add reports to create a new report, or for any open reports that I've got, I can click up here in the top left of the report view to come to this same window, which will allow you to modify the settings of the report. The first thing you can choose for each report is what it calls the style, or actually it's probably more useful to consider it the template of reports, which will sort of pre-populate a number of key fields or perform a number of operations on the data and will affect the way that data is presented. Each report does that. Each report style does that a little differently, but each report can be customized from sort of the original defaults. But that's where you start, by choosing the style, and then you can choose the search period, the time of day, date and time that you'd want the report to run from. So if you're a Akixi Lite user, you wouldn't have access to the real-time choice, only these other historic choices. But those historic choices can also include specifying exactly the start and end of the interval that you want to report over. But yeah, 1,000, 2,000 users will get the real time as well, which will mean whatever you're looking at will update in real time based on your activity. Under the filters, we can choose any further details we want to narrow the specificity of the report. So if you want, so for example, if you wanted a report that only calls back calls related to a particular telephone number to or from, you can put that in here. Just type that in. Or if there are calls relating to user extensions that you'd like to see, you can just select those users here. You can also choose the direction of the calls. If for example, you might only want to see inbound or outbound only, that's all possible. You can also choose the answer type, what happened to the call, to narrow your search. And actually, if we move on to the other tab, there's some additional filters, even more specific filters about segmentation and start and end reasons, ring time, call time. Not necessarily applicable every day, but it just shows you the power the tool has to ask very specific questions about your organization's call activity. And then for each report, you'll see a number columns relating to different figures, different KPIs, different counts. The fields will show you what's currently going to be in your report, but actually if you click on the add here on the right, there are a number of other things that you can add, which may be of interest to you, and I'll come back to that in a bit more detail in a moment. Scheduling is quite important. In practice, most users aren't going to want to come into the report into the portal all the time to see the reports. So what you can do is once you've built your report, is schedule it to be sent to you by email. You can choose the exact the days and the exact time that it's sent, what attachment type you receive. CSV is probably the most useful, so that you can then do some more of your own analysis on that data when you receive it. But yeah, once set, that will just come to the email address that's associated with the administrator login. And while in principle that means it will go to one person, what we can do as a way of automating the delivery of the reports to multiple people is if you give us a sort of a distribution group email address to be the Akixi login, then that's what's contacted by all the schedules. So there is a way of automatically distributing the same report to multiple people. So that's just a little bit about report configuration. What I've actually got here on my my master screen is one of every report style or report template to show you what the different options are. Here, the first one, the historic call list, is designed just to give you a list of individual calls, individual CDRs for the search period, and based on your other filter. So right at the moment, I'm looking at. Let me just go back in and see what I did. I'm actually filtering for inbound abandoned calls only, so I'm only seeing those types of calls. If I wanted to see my inbound answered calls only, I can ask that question too, and I immediately get that data as a response. And I can schedule for that to be sent to me, or actually as well along the top here. It might be a bit small for you for this webinar, but there is an export button here as well, so you can dynamically get a download of the data. So it's just giving me just a dump there of anything that you run. You can access that straight away. In terms of other historical templates, you can also do different summaries. So there's a call by day summary. So for a wider search period, you will see sums of different KPIs on a daily basis. So here for the month of May so far, it's provided these totals for me. But I can also do a weekly summary. So for a wider period, it's given me a sum per week, or there's a similar one by month. But actually, these reports are based on sort of algorithmically generated data that only goes back so far. So I don't have much before April here to search. And this other style, calls by half-hour interval, is quite interesting, where for a longer period, say a week or a month, it will take all the data for the same half-hour interval for each of those days and sum that together. So as you look down the list, you can get a very quick sense of what's happening across the day in a typical sort of business day. We have many customers who you'll see around 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. will peak suddenly with an influx of calls as people are awake, as the office opens, and then you'll see a tail off towards lunchtime, maybe a smaller peak in the afternoon that will tail off as the afternoon goes by. An interesting use case actually is we've used this with NHS, small NHS practice installations, where there's a lot of pressure on this very particular period of between sort of 8 and 9 a.m. in the morning, where everyone tries to call at once, and everyone's trying to get through at the same time, and we've used this tool just to help them benchmark actually how many calls they're receiving and what resource that they need for that period. And actually, with that, it tails off very quickly in the morning and doesn't recur again. So really, they need to be hiring lots of people only in the morning to answer those calls, or distributing those calls amongst their organisation to take them only in the morning, because that's the time. That's when the pressure's on. that's when they're peaking for their calls. The 1000 licensing I mentioned does open up real-time views of various kinds. So here is one where we're getting this sort of wallboard dashboard view. I can click this arrow to minimize this, and I can maximize this on a screen on the wall, LCD TV or what have you, for everybody in the room to see. Or I could have it on an iPad or something for me to refer to, or if with the mobile app, it'll also display this way through the mobile app, and it just gives you a much more visual cues over your data. And in terms of configuring this, it's just the same as all the other report styles with the same options. But here, under fields, well, all these things here in the list are the different boxes that you can see. And as you move these up and down, it will change the order they display in. For each box, you can also change the colors of the background and the text, or maybe add a gauge instead, so that it's a bit more pictorial. And there's also alarming options here. So based on different Boolean rules, you can set it to flash like it is in the left at the moment. It's flashing because it's passed an alarm for waiting now. But that's not the only real-time report option. There are other ones that might be of value. This report style, active calls, just shows you just the calls that are in session at the moment. This yellow line is an alerting call. It's ringing inbound. No one's picked it up yet, but it's active, and it'll go green if somebody picks it up. And it will just keep updating in real time as these things change. There's also an extension view where you can observe potentially the whole estate, but potentially maybe just key users within the business, or just one set of people, one team within the business. You can actually look at all their individual stats, which are summarized as you go across the screen, and which will update in real time. Again, we're getting green lines for in-session calls. These are sort of yellow lines for alerting ringing calls that aren't being picked up yet. You'll see different colors and different icons will appear for DND status, and a few other statuses. And if you don't have a big screen to work with, there's the same view here, more in a BLF style, so much more condensed. But if you mouse over any of these people, you can get more stats, more information on them, what it is that they're doing. And there's also this one, unreturned lost calls, where the template is taking a note of all the inbound calls that were originally abandoned, and then matching them to calls back to the same caller numbers, the same CLIs, to confirm whether or not that callback's occurred. All the green lines you can see, it's marked that return call, and that's okay, but all the red lines are inbound abandoned calls that have yet to receive a callback. And then if we go into the 2000 license option, the view is very similar, but now you're unlocking stats specific to your call center features, your call center activity. With regular users, you're never really going to know when they're available. With the BroadSoft call center, each user will dynamically sign in and out to advertise their availability, to advertise when they're free to take a call or busy not to take a call. All that information is captured and can be displayed here. In fact, if we go on to this next style here, you can get a similar extension view, but actually what we might call an ACD agent view, where for each extension user that is a call center agent, you're getting their current call center status, what they're up to, and again, this updates in real time. And if we go on to one of the other styles here, the ACD activity log, then what we're capturing here is all those status changes. So every time somebody says, every time somebody signs in, we will timestamp that. Every time somebody signs out, we timestamp that. Every time they change to DND to say they're busy for whatever reason, if they're at a meeting or they need to go on a break or what have you, every status change like that is logged here. And you can search on a per agent basis to review their productivity. And finally, actually, let me see. Let's do this one here. And also within the 2000 license, there's also a hunt group summary report. This is not specific to call center, but it is offered by the software vendor at the same level. This is only accessed by 2000, but you can get a simple summary of activity for each of your distribution group numbers. So not numbers that have been assigned to user extensions, but the other distribution group numbers that you might be using within your organization. And there is a BLF version of the same here, for smaller screens. So that's quite a quick summary of all the different options that you have within Akixi. But it's worth. But I just wanted to go now and just talk a little bit more about what it does in practice, some of its use in practice. I'm just going to just bear with me. So I'm just bringing you to another window here. I'm just signing in more like an actual customer. And just to show you some of the things that might be useful to me. So what I've got on my test bench are a number of users who are both a standard and Clarity extension users and also are call center agent users, and I can view them both through the extension list and through the agent list. One of the things that you'll find that in practice when you're using Akixi, certainly in sort of the early days, is that the fields, I said I was going to come back to this, the default report templates that you launch will include a number of fields, but not necessarily all of the fields. In fact, let me just try doing this a slightly different way. So if I want to add a new report, for example, and I want to look at my extension list, and I want to include it, let's just say, so I don't overwhelm the screen. I just want to look at the first bunch of users. You'll see the default fields that it's going to give me are only a sub-selection of all the fields that are potentially available. And it sort of predetermines the order as well. I need to make sure I give this a different name. But not all this information is necessarily useful to me. I am also be looking for some other things. One thing that's noticeable from the defaults is if I go into call counts, while it does track inbound abandoned, and it can show me inbound abandoned on a per user basis. That's not included in the field choices I get by default, but I can easily add that. But it's something that I might want to do. And similarly, the overflowed counts are not in the defaults, which are also things that I might want to include. And you can also play around with the order that they're displayed as well. So you see here on the top here, the order of my columns will match whatever I've set here in the field. So, and I find it's quite helpful in terms of interrogating the data to try and move similar types of stats up against each other. So for example, my inbound calls I might want to have before my inbound answered, before my inbound abandoned. My outbound calls I might want to have before my outbound answered or outbound failed. Overflowed in, maybe I place that before my inbound, and overflowed out, I place that after my overflowed off. So you could sort of see more, and let's move my advanced down here as well. So I've got more of the logical flow of the data from left to right actually makes a bit more sense than perhaps some of the defaults would suggest. In terms of what these things mean, the active calls, obviously in a real-time report, it's going to count the number of calls I've got in session right now. For overflowed in, it's going to count calls that are delivered to this particular extension that were originally called somewhere else on the Clarity platform. So they were call forwarded on from somewhere else overflowed in onto this number to ring. In is just in answered is answered, in abandoned is abandoned. It is important to note that what we mean by abandoned is that the caller came through and hung up before there was any opportunity for the call to be properly answered by anybody on the customer side, on my organisation side. Quite often we get asked questions about I'm getting dropped calls, I don't know where my calls are going, I might people are saying they can't get through, and those descriptions don't necessarily translate to the abandoned state in the manner that this application will report it. So if they come through and it's ringing and they get bored of waiting and they hung up, then that's genuinely abandoned. But if they actually ring a primary number and nobody picks up and they get transferred to a secondary number or put through to an operator or to voicemail, the call was not delivered in the primary place where it's supposed to be, but that doesn't count as abandoned. Something else has happened to that call. That call has still been answered, so it's not going to be counted there. Outbound answered, outbound failed. Quite straightforward. Overflowed off is the call transfer situation in reverse. If Adam's extension is rung directly and they don't pick up and they are set to call forward, follow me on to another number on the Clarity platform, then it will show as overflowed off here. And advanced is actually more related to call distribution within the same group number, in that let's say we've got a hunt group and we've got a linear search of that hunt group to hunt through each of these guys individually in order until somebody picks up. Then if the call starts with Adam and he doesn't pick up and the hunt group rolls over to Billy, then that's one advanced call for Adam, but because he didn't pick up and it had to be advanced to Billy, and so on. That's what advanced means. And the talk times are fairly self-explanatory. And let's try doing a couple of calls in practice so you can see what actually happens. So I've set this up right. So I'm just calling Adam's extension there. So it's alerting to show that it's ringing, and the onus is on him to pick up. If I hang up the call before he answers, that's now going to show as an abandoned call. And then if I try. So here we've got a hunt group where I've got Colin ringing, and it's hunted through those guys there. So it's interesting. Okay. Let me try this one here. So I'm now ringing a call center, which is set to circular hunt a couple of my agents. So yeah. So for the call center distribution group, because Colin didn't pick up and it's advanced to Adam, it does count that as an advanced call. And now it's overflowed on no answer from that group to a second group where it's ringing a couple of other guys. One thing that comes up quite a bit as well that isn't necessarily immediately apparent is the calls that are counted are dependent on the numbers being rung. So in a situation where, actually, let me show you. Let's do it this way. So I've got here This is a calls by day report which I'm actually running in real time, so I can get the updates in real time. And I'm basically collecting all the data for the whole estate for my organisation. So any call activity it should be able to capture. I'm just going to call that call centre number again. And it's currently ringing the original set of agents in the hunt group. And now it's overflowed to a hunt group number as an overflow for the fact that none of the agents have picked up. What you noticed, I don't know whether you spotted that, but and I'll hang up there now. The number of inbound calls in just went from a count of 8 to 11. So that was just me as a single caller calling into the business, but here it's recorded three calls, and that's because of the way I filtered this report to capture all calls to all of my numbers. And the overflow sequence for my call was to call first the call center number, which secondly overflowed to a sort of a secondary hunt group, and then when nobody picked up there as well, it actually went to a voicemail number, and those 3 steps of the call flow are effectively counted as 3 different calls, which is why the count has moved from 8 to 11. So in real life scenarios where people are creating summary reports, that logic can potentially catch them out, in that it may look like that they may think that they're taking more real calls than they actually are, but it's just the way that the report's been filtered. In practice, the best thing to do is to if you've got a main number through which you're routing all of your calls, all of your inbound calls, maybe it starts with an auto attendant or a primary call queue on a call center, then generate a report and filter that report on that number so that you're only capturing the inbound on that number, and that will give you a much truer total of the calls that are coming into the business on that number. And there's effectively no limit to the number of reports that you can create. Actually, you could build separate summary reports for each of your main inbound numbers. Maybe you've got a couple of different offices or a couple of different major departments, so you want to be building separate reports around those primary entry points to gather more accurate data. And the same applies to the wallboard. I mean, all the wallboard is doing is showing the same information in a more pictorial fashion. Here I've got my inbound calls at 11, and that will count up for every call that the wallboard report is set to capture. Again, here I'm filtered to capture everything at all, everything within the business, but I do have the ability to be more specific than that. So if there's an extension number, an IVR number, or a group number that I want to capture that data against, I can do that. The same principle behind creating reports around different numbers is also quite useful from a troubleshooting perspective as well. Here again, if I'm looking at this super summary report, well, I know I've got 6 overflowed in calls, 6 overflowed off calls, but I don't know. This report isn't going to tell me where those calls came from or what forwarding situation those calls are relating to. So by building some historical summary reports around individual numbers, you start to build a much clearer picture over which numbers are forwarding on, which numbers are taking calls from forwards, and although you won't get the forwarding destinations or the forwarding origins here, you can go back to build a historic call list, again based around the same report criteria, so you can then see all the individual data. I mean, if I just launch this as it is, you'll notice that for every again, this isn't really filtered very granularly, but what you're getting in each case is the CDR is telling you not just where the call is coming from, and not just the number that was called, but what number was offered by the telephone system in response to that call. So in a hunt group situation or a call queue situation, the offered number is not going to be the same as the call number. So you can work out. So you've got a bit more detail of what's going on. And then where the call is advanced on, you've got some information here as well about where is that call going next. So by creating the right set of reports side by side, you can very quickly establish exactly where the call has gone and why it went where it went, and then match that back to whatever configuration is in SMT. I mean, in the event that the call shouldn't have gone there, and it's related to a configuration issue, and you can track this back and correct that configuration in the SMT portal, or encourage the customer to do it themselves through the SMT portal. So that's about as much ground as I was planning to cover this afternoon for you. We've got a bit of time left to field a few questions if anybody has any questions. This interface does give you a box where you can type in questions that I can see and answer. If you have anything burning that you'd like to put to me now, or if you think of any questions later, then you're welcome to contact us, the pre-sales team here at InClarity, and we can go through it with you individually. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. In closing, I guess from a pre-sales perspective, in terms of approaching any customer that might have some use for Akixi. I mean, the reality is most customers would benefit from having Akixi. It's just about trying to demonstrate what the value actually is in terms of how it might help them understand their business. Certainly in a situation where if somebody's saying, well, I've got a phone system, but I don't know where my calls go, I don't know how many calls are being answered, I don't know how efficient my business is, the reports here can easily help solve those problems and answer those questions. Obviously, the tool is quite powerful, and if you're not quite sure what you want, then there is the potential to get a little bit stuck. It can seem quite for a new user, and particularly someone who's not necessarily very technically literate, it can seem a bit intimidating, seem a bit baffling. They may launch the default versions of these reports on the right without changing the fields, without changing the filters. When actually that's really where the power comes from, is by adapting each report style to suit the needs of the business. So it's certainly worth taking a bit of time out at the early stages to talk to the customer about what they think they might want, what questions they want to ask. If they're not quite sure what they want, to prompt them to go away and think about that a bit more, so they can come back with some ideas to sort of feed into the interface. And if they put a question to you that you're not quite sure how to answer with the portal, or whether it's something that the portal might not be able to answer, you're certainly welcome to forward those questions on to us to see if we can crack them from here and show you what styles, what filters, what things you might need to set up to satisfy those requirements. That's absolutely fine. That's one of the reasons why we're here. Okay, and we still haven't had any questions through, so I think we'll draw this session to a close now. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I hope that was helpful. And yeah, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.